Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. Going to talk about something today that many times it's uncomfortable to talk about, but it's a part of life, and we really need to put some spotlight on it. This all starts with a wonderful center, a gateway, if you will, for health, beauty, wellness, and aging services. It's on a campus that supports a 45-bed assisted living program for the elderly and so much more, so many amenities. And it's located in New Mexico. And today we're going to learn about the MAID program. It's not what you're thinking about when we say the word MAID. I'm referring to the Center for Ageless Living, and we've got the founder once again with us. Suzette Lindemuth is on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Very well. Very well. It's great to have you back here. I've learned so much about, not just about the center, but also about the aging process and also how you support those within that center. When we say the MAID program, let's get that out of the way. That's not what it sounds like. It's something totally different. Please explain.
Well, I just have to tell you how this all started. It was that we had a new resident move in, and she actually said to my administrator, "Do you have maid service?" And of course, my administrator said, "Well, of course, we have daily, weekly as needed." And she said, no, not that kind of maid service. So we started to learn a little bit about what that is here in New Mexico. And I think many people kind of don't like to talk about what we call medical assistance in dying. But it is something that has come up over the years, particularly when the Kevorkian episode happened, and we were all brought to an awareness that, terminal illness was difficult to deal with, and that there were some ways to look at legislation to assist with that process. So that's kind of how I got some more information about the MAID program, and so I'm glad that we're going to be able to talk a little bit about it.
I'm glad we can, and I totally get it. Side note, I on the marketing side, I work with funeral homes. Just what we're talking about, pre-planning. And I think a lot of it comes down to planning for the future. It's inevitable. It's going to happen to all of us. You have a guest. Who do we have with us today?
So I'm going to have Jan Wilson, who's with the MAID program here in New Mexico. She's the outreach and education coordinator. And so I'm glad to have Jan here, and I'm going to let Jan kind of introduce herself, if that's okay.
Beautiful. Hi, Jan.
Well, I'm really good. Hi there. How are you doing?
Good. Welcome.
It's snowing here. Can't believe it.
Did you just say it's snowing there?
Anyway. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's New Mexico to be expected, but, I just don't I've never been there. I think maybe once I drove through, and we have had basically no snow in the New York area. I'm talking like the metro area, not upstate or anything like that. And it's actually 50 degrees and partly sunny today. So it's hard to even imagine snow. But thanks for sharing that. I got to get there one day.
Well, I'm actually with the End of Life Options New Mexico organization. And we formed after the law, the Elizabeth Whitefield End of Life Options law that includes medical aid in dying. And we formed after that law was passed, but that was like 3.5 years ago. And what we're trying to do now is go out and make sure everybody in our wonderful state at least knows about all the options that we have. And one of the most misunderstood, I think, is the medical aid in dying law. And so I'm going to be focusing on that here today. I'm going to, Suzette's invited me to do a talk after this. And so that's really exciting because, as you mentioned, very few people like to talk about it. Even though people come to all my classes and everything, you can tell they're almost under duress, trying to think that, gee, I am going to die one of these days.
It is very uncomfortable, and especially when you're even with a loved one, let's say it's your parents, even having that conversation, it's uncomfortable, but in the end, no pun intended, it just makes life so much easier, right?
Absolutely. In fact, we usually say this is the greatest gift that you can give to your loved ones, is to have an advanced health care directive which tells what you want if you can't speak anymore, and also talking about what kind of end of life, once you have a really serious disease or a terminal disease, what you would want. And I think from what I've heard from people in my classes, people really count on having their parents do this for them. It makes their life so much easier, and they don't feel any guilt because they know this is what their parents wanted.
Now, Dan, you mentioned a moment ago that I believe I heard you right. This is a law?
Yes. We're one of 9 other states and the District of Columbia to have this law in place. Oregon and Washington were the first ones, but then there have been other states, and a lot of states, including New York, are working real hard to get this act passed in their own states. It's just hard getting it through some of the committees, and then actually in one state, it got through everything, and then the governor would not sign it. That's how hard we have to work at getting people to realize it's just a choice, just like so many other things that we want to keep as choices in our life.
I'm a firm believer. Everything is a choice. What you do in 5 seconds from now, right now, you made a choice. 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 years, whatever it may be. And for those who say, well, look what just happened. You know what? You choose to react a certain way. So I believe everything's a choice. When we look at this law, let's break that down, because I'm intrigued knowing that there's a law attached to this.
Right. Yeah. We worked very hard. We started back in 2012, and it wasn't passed until 2021.
Wow.
Just because they have to go through all these committees and then trying to get over the bias that people have. I think they think somebody's just going to go down to Walmart and buy a pill and bring it back and give it to their grandmother or something to get her out of the way. And that's not it at all. There's a lot of safeguards, and we wrote a lot of things into our law that other states now are amending their laws because they think we've done such a good job. Can you tell I'm kind of proud of New Mexico in this way?
Yeah, well, it seems like it was a long time coming and took a long time to get them to see and understand. Can you help us understand a little bit more of what the law provides for?
Right. Basically, it's for terminally ill patients who have the desire to hasten their death by medical assistance, i.e. medications. They have to be competent or have the capacity to know what they're doing and why they're doing it and what's going to happen. That's a big thing, as well as be able to express that. Some of our volunteers that sit with people when they're going through this ask the question, are you sure this is what you want to do? And do you want to do it now? And they do this over and over until the person has finally taken all the medicine and has died. So we are very, very careful to make sure this is what people want. It has to be a voluntary decision on the patient's part, and only the patient. Tell you the truth, the family and your healthcare agent, they shouldn't enter into this decision at all, because a lot of times they say people make their family member feel guilty about taking up so much burden and such a care. And we don't want that to happen. So the person has to make a voluntary decision. You have to find 2 medical providers to say that, yes, you are terminal. Terminal, in our case anyway, means you have 6 months or less to live. If your disease or syndrome or situation goes according to the usual protocols and standards of medicine. So that's right there. That's the first challenge. But then once you've talked to somebody and you have a medical provider willing to write you a prescription, then you can have it filled. It's made with 5 different medications that do different things. And you set a date of when you want to have your day, I guess you could call it. I haven't come up with a good word for that. But anyway, not quite your birthday, but, and then you get a chance to say goodbye to all your friends and loved ones. And that's what's so great about this, is you get to choose when you want to do it after you've chosen that you do want to do it.
So
and we have,
I'd like to go back before we even go further. The determination that's made to move forward with this. Now, as you said, there's a couple of protocols in place, how somebody says what they're feeling and all of that. But that final decision made from I guess the medical standpoint, the legal standpoint, how does that take place?
Well, usually people are suffering so much and they know what's coming next. And so you don't get people who, just have come down with something, and I'm trying to come up with a good example, but
well, I think like cancer is a good example that, there are lots of treatments for cancer and you may be going through that, but inevitably there's a decision made by you and maybe your family that you're going to go on hospice, and then you're really thinking about trying to have closure in your life. And then there's that wanting to have more control over when you are going to die, and taking that next step to contact, this organization and the physicians that are involved in it. Again, it's not designed for people that are not incompetent or can't make these decisions. And so it's really that journey, I think, through an illness.
Right. And most people have thought about this for a long time, maybe before they even became sick. Obviously, I think about it just about every day with the work I do. But we have a whole other cadre of volunteers with End of Life Options New Mexico that we say are client support volunteers. And so if somebody is on the edge, they're not quite sure what it's all going to mean, they can call us and get a trained volunteer to walk them through not just medical aid in dying, but all the other options in case there's one that perhaps their doctor hasn't told them about yet.
How far out?
Probably.
You know what? We have a delay on our internet connection, so I apologize for jumping in there when you're talking.
That's okay. Suzette warned me, and I've been jumping in on you, so I'm sorry too.
It's all good. It's all good. I was just curious, how far in advance, and everything's variable, in these situations. Nobody can say, well, you have 2 weeks left, but how far in advance can somebody enact the MAID program? Is there a protocol for that? Reason, let's say, maybe a doctor says, well, best case scenario, you may have 6 months to live. Is there some kind of guideline there?
Well, yes. And that's what we require, is that you have two medical providers actually that say you have 6 months or less. And that's based on their experience and their knowledge of medical protocols and what happens to people. Personally, I think people should start thinking about what they might want, way ahead, so they can be preparing. What you might want to do is talk to your doctor now, especially if you are getting sick or getting sicker, where it could be a real possibility that you'll be have a terminal diagnosis, that you talk to your doctors now and say, would you support this? Would you help me? Or do I need to start looking for another doctor? Or would you refer me to somebody? Now, the good news is our organization keeps a list of all of the medical providers that will be a prescribing and or consulting medical provider for somebody who would like to go through medical aid in dying. I don't keep the list because it could change so much, but our volunteers with client support have a list. They have a list of the pharmacies. It has to be a compounding pharmacy. They have a list of the pharmacies also that will fulfill the prescription. We also have a list of all of the hospices. Now, here in New Mexico, we have 16 hospices that we know of that will provide some support. And it comes in different layers. But we keep track of that so that if people have no family, aren't really close to their medical provider, they have somebody that they can come to and get some of this information. So I'd say as soon as you got the terminal diagnosis, you start thinking about this, deciding what you want. As Suzette said, if you have a cancer diagnosis, it usually progresses, and there may be treatments that you want to try first. And then if they don't work for some reason, then you move on to what are the other options that we have. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, I think I started to ramble a bit.
No, it really did. And, clearer picture of it. And I have to ask the I guess it's the obvious question. I have to imagine that there's some that don't agree with this and have given some pushback. What have you encountered so far?
Yeah, we got a lot of that when we were going through the legislature and trying to get it passed in the different committees and then in the full House and Senate. All we can do is tell them that we have so many safeguards and that we feel this is just one of the choices. It's not like we, as an organization anyway, are advocating that people do this. Actually, there's a very, very small percentage of people that choose this and choose to go through the process. And then a lot of times they don't even take the medication because they know it's there. And it gives them such peace of mind that they don't have to go any further. And then they die, I'll say naturally, from whatever disease they have.
Wow. I'm gonna cut you off right there because thank you for saying that. I think that's the game changer. In my mind, it is a safety net for when you get to the point where this is just unbearable. I know it's inevitable. I'm at that point now, but then maybe you start feeling a little bit better. And then you maybe, as you say, pass away naturally, but at least you have a fallback. And thank you for bringing up that point.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'd like to bring out that I talked with a woman whose brother used medical aid in dying here when it was first became legal. And there are members of her family they have not even told yet that that's how he died because they are so against it. We find that some people who are very religious, they tend to be against it. And we try to stay away from religious and or political views. We just want people to have knowledge and the choice.
And that is the key word, and that word has come up a few times. Choice. You have the choice. Whether you want it, just to know that you have a choice says a lot there. When this goes in the direction of somebody looking to make that choice, what are some of the other factors involved that maybe we haven't talked about today?
Well, they do need to find two providers. Now, we have an exception in our law that is the first one in all the different states, that if you're already in hospice, and probably 95% or so of the people that do this are already in hospice. They already know they are terminal. Mm-hmm. That counts as one of your providers. So you only need to get another provider. And in our state, we allow nurse practitioners and PAs to be counted as one of the two providers. This makes it a lot more inclusive and accessible for people in our state. Not like New York, where the towns go from one right into the next one. You can go for miles and hours. And so having this kind of availability is very helpful out in the rural parts of our state.
I wanted to ask one question about people with memory loss and dementia, Alzheimer's, because that's such a difficult disease process. And is it something that people can preemptively decide that they want to do this while they're cognitively alert and then have, their power of attorney or guardian or family member fulfill this? Is it something that can be done like that? I mean, I'm sure that's a controversial issue because, Alzheimer's is well, it's a devastating disease. We know that. And so how does that work?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is one part of the law that we have to be very careful about, because as I mentioned before, you have to have cognitive ability and the ability to follow directions, because you have to be able to drink down or manipulate a catheter of some kind at the time. And unfortunately, even if somebody said, well, I would have wanted this, if they cannot initiate the action, and we're always afraid that people with Alzheimer's or other dementia are going to forget what they're doing in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, by the time they have that 6-month terminal diagnosis, a lot of times they're really pretty far gone. And if you don't drink all of the medication, I was going to say it's going to be fatal, but that's the problem. It may not be fatal. Mm-hmm. It could just wreak havoc on people's organs. So we don't want that. But it's the biggest thing is that they can't always express what they want. Mm-hmm. They have to be able to show that kind of capacity.
Wow.
And that's one of the safeguards we always point to.
How interesting. And again, this just brings the spotlight on the fact that somebody has to be fairly or maybe fully cognizant to follow through with what needs to get done. And if you're not at that point, then this, I guess, is not going to take place.
Right. Yeah. And there are other things that people can do, which maybe would be topic for another podcast. I don't know. Voluntary stopping eating and drinking, which is something that you do not need a terminal diagnosis for, and anybody can do it, and you can write it into your advance directive. But medical aid in dying, right now, here in the United States, we can't do that.
And we do see a lot of elders as they become more frail and more frail, that eating and drinking is something they really stop doing. And when they're at that point, you know, we see failure to thrive and they're on the hospice program, is that as caregivers, we want to honor their refusal for intake. So that is part of the hospice program and hospice learning that our staff go through, our caregivers go through. And that's a hard thing to watch sometimes, because it does take time and death is coming, and it's not always easy to watch the process. But as caregivers and as professionals, we really appreciate our hospice agencies who give us the support to be able to do that.
I appreciate both of you for bringing this to the forefront. Many of us unaware that these programs even exist. And those, in certain states where it hasn't been enacted yet, something to think about there. Suzette, what's the best way if somebody wants to find out more about your center?
So you can contact us directly through my email, Suzette at nmagelessliving.com, or go to our webpage, nmagelessliving.com. I'd love to hear from everybody who's listening to this. If you have questions or concerns or other issues you'd like us to talk about, I look forward to that. So I'm glad we had this little discussion about MAID here in New Mexico, and we hope it has opened up some eyes and ears to some possibilities that maybe people didn't know about with regard to death.
I completely agree. Again, not the easiest topic to talk about, but it's a part of life, and it should be somebody's choice. And I think many people believe that, as we've seen with the law being enacted. Suzette and Dan, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Okay, we'll see you next week.
Agelessness, the art of growing old without regard to time. The Center for Ageless Living is your gateway to health, beauty, wellness, and aging services. We are located in the heart of Valencia County at 5 Thomas Road in Los Lunas, New Mexico. The center is located on a 6-acre campus committed to creating a community around aging gracefully. Visit us online at nmagelessliving.com for more information.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her?
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge?
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend?
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.